back to FANSPLAINED, a media criticism podcast with Ryan and Em. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Em.
In this episode, we're continuing our deep dive exploration series into the MCU with 2008's The Incredible Hulk. It's no secret that this is one of the less memorable pieces of the MCU. As a piece of the whole, it holds an odd place of semi-retconning its 2003 predecessor, while also being semi-retconned by the rest of the MCU. For those newer to fandom jargon, and we know there are some of you, what this means is that the movie argues with the story established in prior iterations, and has other films or shows that come later that argue with its own story and logic that it seeks to establish.
It's basically trying to keep elements of a movie while also being like, okay, but not these events, these events in this context.
Yeah, so if you're watching, say, a long-running TV show and they establish something about one character in one episode, and then they give you the next episode and they completely change everything about that character even though they just established it an episode prior, that would be them retconning what they just established.
It's kind of like how, what was it? The old X-Men movies basically kind of tried to retcon X3 out of existence.
Yes. I mean, everything tries to retcon X3 out of existence. We'll get to that.
It's an annoying thing to have to deal with sometimes, but then sometimes it's a welcome thing if you hated what they're trying to retcon.
This tends to be one of those movies that would have been better served if they could have decided whether or not it was going to retcon anything or not.
It feels like they're just cherry-picking stuff from this movie to keep at this point.
Exactly. So what this means is that despite being only the second release within the MCU, and this movie was released a month later than Iron Man. That's it. A month. The canon, or this film's place in the MCU, of this film is both questionable and up for debate, and it's one of the few films that has that reputation. The only things that really have that reputation within the MCU anymore are like the ABC TV shows like we covered with Agent Carter, where they can't decide if it's canon or not.
Like, a good example of this is how when we saw like the whole collection of the MCU Blu-rays in the store, and all of them were pretty much priced the same, whereas The Incredible Hulk was the only one that was like $10 or lower.
Yeah.
That's basically the whole attitude.
If you can even
movie.
find it. Because, like, when they re-release them in stores or whatever, because they'll do that, they'll re-release them when they're trying to redesign them to make them all fit within their phase or whatever.
Yeah.
Good luck ever finding The Incredible Hulk. It's, like...
Like, I saw it out there when they were still hyping things up for Endgame, but after that, it's like...
to be fair, some of that is because, and there are production issues I'll get to in just a second, but there are production issues with The Incredible Hulk, so there's sort of a reason why that's a thing. Sort of. But we'll also be looking at the related one-shot, The Consultant, which was released later, like years later, with the home release of Thor in 2011. This movie was released in 2008. They created the one-shot series in 2011, and The Consultant is made purely to contextualize the end of The Incredible Hulk, which feels very out of place in a movie where everything feels out of place. So what this does is that it sets The Incredible Hulk, despite its early release, into the chronology with some timeline overlap between Iron Man 2, The Incredible Hulk, Thor, and the two one-shots that are kind of there to contextualize both Thor and The Incredible Hulk. So instead of being set in 2008, this is set in 2011.
Yeah.
Like, Iron Man 1 is 2010, Iron Man 2 is like 2010 to 2011-ish, because it's about 6 months after Iron Man 1.
Yeah.
This one kind of overlaps a little bit with the end of Iron Man 2. The Consultant, it fits right in with the end of The Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
Thor fits in also a little bit with the end of Iron Man 2, but only a little bit. Then you have the one shot that contextualizes Coulson's trip out to New Mexico, and we'll cover that next week when we cover Thor.
Mm-hmm.
And so Thor is kind of happening at the same time as this movie, but not entirely. Not one of these three films is happening exactly at the same time, but they have this weird overlap period.
I feel like if someone were to actually try to make a flow chart of this timeline, it would just be a bunch of tangled up Christmas lights.
This part of it, yeah, this area of it, and then once you get to, we're releasing 5 movies a year and they all overlap, that, the period of 2017 gets really, really intense as well. But this was back when they were still trying to establish a timeline, which is why it gets equally messy.
Mm-hmm, because then if they have them all set around the same time, then they can just shove them all in the Avengers at the end.
Mm-hmm. This is also the only, if I remember correctly, the only MCU film proper to not have an end credit scene.
Yeah.
The end scene kind of feels like it should be one, but it isn't.
No, it comes like at the very end of the movie and then the credits roll.
Mm-hmm. But there isn't one. It's one of the few, I honestly think it is the only one without an end credit scene.
Because we fast forwarded it and we looked
we
through
checked.
it.
It's not there. At least it's not there on the home release. If it was there in the theater, I don't know what it was. Because I don't think they were actively working on one at the time.
I don't know. I mean,
Thor didn't happen until a couple years later.
They probably shot Tony's scene with Ross, like, at the same time they were shooting Iron Man.
Yeah, I think they did.
And that's why they were able to release both of them that close together in the same year.
Yeah. So The Incredible Hulk brings with it an incredible amount of tension in its production, to the point that it's more of a surprise, at least to us, that it managed to be made at all.
Yeah.
Released only a month following the whirlwind success of Iron Man in 2008, which I've already stated, The Incredible Hulk had big shoes to fill, and the shoes never made it back out of their forgotten place in the back closet corner. Marvel at this time still had licensing for their various properties spread among a wide array of companies. We covered this in our Captain America episode. And the Hulk was, and actually still is to a degree, attached to Universal. This arrangement seems to be more forgiving for Marvel than that of their arrangement with Sony and Spider-Man, but it does continue to complicate the development of the character and related projects, which is why we haven't actually ever seen another attempt at a solo film. It's why we always see the Hulk in ensemble things, because they don't have to go through Universal to release or distribute any of those. Mm-hmm. Whereas if it is a solo film, they have to go through Universal first before they get to decide whatever they want to do with it. They didn't try to lobby back for their complete rights from Universal the way that they did with all of the Paramount distributed movies. So Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, whatever.
And it feels like Sony is the only one they're willing to, like, cooperate with to the extent that they are right now.
It's because Spider-Man is more successful.
Yeah, because Spider-Man's intensely successful and way more popular than Hulk is. And Spider-Man has shown that it can bring in the money where a solo Hulk movie like this one doesn't do nearly what they want.
No, at the time they thought that it was moderately successful. It made about twice of its budget. So it doubled its budget, basically, which at the time when they weren't really expecting much of anything out of these Marvel movies, that was considered somewhat successful. But when you compare it to Iron Man blowing everything out of the water,
yeah,
it looks like an abject failure and is kind of treated as such after the fact. Like, a lot of the things established in this movie really are not carried forward into anything, including the actor, including the director, including... Hell, the only thing they've kept are some of the side characters for other appearances later.
Yeah. And Betty just disappears completely.
Poor Betty.
Until we get to What If, and then she shows up randomly.
Yeah. Uncovered. Universal. So the first issue up against the Incredible Hulk was its own reputation. Universal and Marvel had, at the time, already relatively recently, if we're looking back at 2008 to 2003 versus 2022 to 2003, attempted a live-action rendition of the character in a solo film with Hulk, made by Ang Lee, which had Eric Bana and Jennifer Connelly, and was it... I don't remember who played General Ross in that.
That was...
Was it Sam Neill?
No, it was not Sam Neill. It was...
Hold on.
Oh my god.
I have a phone. I can look this up. Hold
I totally had his name, and now I'm just blanking.
I broke it. Sam Elliott?
No.
You sure?
Well...
Hold on. We're looking it up. We're looking it up. I'm just going to throw out a bunch of weird names.
Maybe it was Sam Elliott.
2003. Not 3003. That. 3000 and late. You're welcome. Let's see.
I was thinking...
It was Sam Elliott.
Okay,
I was right.
Well, who was, Yeah, who was Nick Nolte playing then? I was thinking of Nick Nolte being Ross.
Brian Banner?
Oh, Bruce's shitty father?
Yeah.
Ew.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Yeah, I had Sam Elliott, so I was right about the Sam. I was just wrong about which Sam it was.
I was mixing him up with Nick Nolte.
Okay.
Because we got William Hurt, who's blonde, and I know Nolte's blonde.
Yeah, and apparently Sam Elliott actually... They tapped Sam Elliott to come back for this, or he wanted to, and they decided not to, or something.
Aww.
Again, because this movie can't decide if it wants to be a sequel, it wants to be a full reboot, it doesn't know.
Oh, Sam Elliott's a good guy.
But that is part of the problem with this film, is that the original rendition of this had been made so recently that it's going to be immediately associated with the prior attempt at the film versus...
Which again,
establishing a new one, and they didn't try hard enough really to establish it as its own reboot because they couldn't decide if they wanted it to be one or not.
Which I just want to go on a tangent for a minute here, that I just don't understand how Ang Lee can make something like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Sense and Sensibility, and then come at us with whatever the fuck Hulk was.
Oh, let me get to that, because I will get to that with some of the cinematography and stuff with this movie where it also could have turned out well and didn't. The answer to what the Incredible Hulk was supposed to be would change depending on who was being asked at the time, which is no surprise because the film was produced by Marvel Studios and Valhalla Motion Pictures, which is now Valhalla Entertainment, and then distributed by Universal, which again holds certain rights to the character and solo film distribution.
Yeah.
And Valhalla does production for like a wide range of companies. So they do a bunch of AMC stuff, a bunch of TV stuff, which is why we end up with one of the Walking Dead actors in this.
Oh. I
believe. I think it was that he was in The Walking Dead. I don't remember what Ty Burrell was actually in, but it was some something he was doing for AMC, I think.
Ty Burrell's in Modern Family.
No, it wasn't that, but hold on. I'm just gonna keep researching stuff because I know that I read this at one time and that I keep forgetting what it was. It was something else he was in that they were like, oh yeah, we definitely want this, and I don't remember what it was. Hold on. This is what happens when I go off script. We just end up talking about nothing. Yeah. Oh, Dawn of the Dead. It was Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, it wasn't
not
The Walking Dead.
I knew it was some zombie thing that I did not care enough about.
It couldn't be The Walking Dead because that show came later after... Oh, no, wait. No, there's The Walking Dead. No, John Bernthal was in that one.
Yes. Yes, he was. There have been so many people in The Walking Dead. How am I supposed to remember this? But it was Dawn of the Dead, which I saw when it came out, and that's all I remember about it. Because it was right after I'd stopped working at the movie theater.
Oh.
Because it came out in 2004. I worked at the movie theater in 2003 when the original Hulk came out. I got off work early to go see the original Hulk.
Oh, God.
Anyway, so this film is it has multiple producers, one distributor. Marvel's never really tried to get the rights back for it. So everyone has an opinion on what this movie's supposed to be, and nobody's opinions match. Not a one. So the writer intended for it to be a follow-up to the previous film, at least at one time, because he had worked on the previous film. He'd done a script treatment for Ang Lee's Hulk.
Oh.
The director claimed it would be a full reboot and only shared surface similarities with the previous film. And Gail Ann Hurd, who was one of the producers from Valhalla, named it as a, quote, requel, combining both elements of a reboot and those of a sequel.
Yikes.
In which case, that doesn't make sense, because these things are two different things.
Yes.
Words mean things.
Yes.
And a sequel is not a reboot. They are different.
It's either a reboot or it's a sequel. You can't have it be both.
You cannot have it both ways.
You really can't.
This is why when you do that, it has to retcon something. Like when they came out with the newer Halloween movies that kind of retcon out Halloween 2 from ever existing.
Yep.
That way it's sort of a reboot and sort of not, because it is still retconning something. That is the only way you can actually do that.
Yes.
This does not successfully do any of those things.
Like all the Batman, like the Nolan Batman trilogy. You had to retcon all of Michael Keaton's stuff. You had to retcon all of that in order for it to work.
And I mean, we'll get into that with DC if we ever do DC, but that is also part of one of the problems with the way that the DCEU was trying to work, is they couldn't decide what they wanted to establish as canon.
No. They just kept trying to push stuff out because they were trying to keep pace with Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
When Marvel, even in this chaotic first phase, still had a better idea of what they were trying to do.
It's because they were still a plan, and the plan was to get to the Avengers.
It's all a part of the plan.
It wasn't, well, we're just going to make Justice League because they made an Avengers, so we should have one.
Yeah.
So, trying to summarize this film, I'm sorry.
Basically, the result is a film that doesn't know what it is or what audience it's looking for.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. It doesn't know anything about it.
And that's why it feels so weird compared to other movies from Phase 1.
It feels a lot more like a DC movie, actually, because it's assuming things exist in the timeline that we haven't seen, that it's trying to reestablish, but doesn't reestablish them, but expects the audience to know them in the way that this new version of it happened. It's a mess.
Yes.
So the Incredible Hulk reintroduces audiences to Bruce Banner, who is a scientist working on gamma radiation as a method to basically recreate the Captain America super soldier experiment. Thinking that he's on the brink of discovery, Banner uses himself as a test subject for his findings, which goes awry and turns him into the Hulk. In this movie, we find Banner about 6 months after this incident, and he's hiding out in Brazil, working on factory lines, trying to keep his anger, no, scratch that, his heart rate, in check.
Yep.
In his off time, Banner is conversing through a dated instant messenger with a Mr. Blue. I'll get to that in a minute. Trying to find a cure for his gamma radiation poisoning that he did to himself.
For science.
For science.
For science.
Except that I don't find that this Bruce Banner cares enough about science. But again,
for
this is a summary.
For science, I poisoned my blood and ruined my life.
For science. Mr. Blue keeps insisting upon additional data, which is only in the hands of Banner's old lab partner and old fling, Betty Ross. This brings Banner back to the States to get in contact with Betty, which unfortunately puts him within firing range of Betty's father, General Ross, who reveals that the gamma radiation experiments were meant for the military on his urging. He's still seeking Banner out after he'd gone into hiding. Ergo, there's your conflict.
Mm-hmm.
To find Banner, the General is tapped into the services of foreign operatives, namely Emil Blonsky, a former Royal Marine, who ends up taking doses of this serum in order to find and face down Banner and the Hulk. However, Blonsky becomes addicted to it, taking more and more of the serum, especially after a near-death experience at the hands of the Hulk, in which he is thrown into a tree and probably should have died.
Basically turned to mush, because
yes.
It took I've seen this movie 3 times now.
I'm sorry.
And it was of my own volition. Well, the 2 were, anyway. And it took until the rewatch for me to see what had happened to him, and he's not focused on, but you can just see the red all on his skin, and it's really disturbing, actually, that he's basically pounded mush at that point.
Yeah, it's like what should have happened to Loki if Loki hadn't been Loki.
Yes.
Yeah. With Betty's help, Banner does eventually get in contact with Mr. Blue, who is actually able to keep Banner's condition in check temporarily, but who has secretly been hoarding samples of Banner's gamma-radiated blood for experimentation in spite of this, so he's also a bad guy. When Blonsky catches up with them, the exposure causes the Abomination to emerge, which is basically Blonsky turning into evil Hulk.
An ugly Hulk.
Yes.
Uglier Hulk.
Terrible dinosaur Hulk. Banner must then make a choice to take this chance at being a changed man, once again, or giving into the Hulk and taking on the Abomination. Yay! The consultant follows in the wake of the Incredible Hulk, showing a meeting between 2 S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, Coulson and Sitwell, who discuss possibilities for the Avengers Initiative, which we find out about at the end of Iron Man 1. In the wake of Banner's incident in Harlem, they reveal that the World Security Council, which is the authority to which S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury answer, we see this come up again later in a couple different movies. They want Blonsky for the Avengers and want to turn around and blame everything on Bruce Banner and make him basically the patsy for what happened. But Fury doesn't want Blonsky on the team. He knows that Blonsky is Blonsky. And so the 2 S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are discussing what they can do to basically sabotage this meeting so that they don't end up with Blonsky, while being able to make it look like it was a natural decision and not something that they had forced to happen. Which is Tony Stark going in as the consultant to go talk to General Ross and annoy the hell out of him so much that he doesn't hand Blonsky over to S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
That's the consultant. 4 minutes. Contextualized the end of a movie from 3 years prior.
A movie that no one really wanted to revisit.
Yeah, pretty much. So, that all said, Louis Leterrier serves as the director for The Incredible Hulk after his original choice of Iron Man was given to Jon Favreau. Leterrier would, like we addressed in our first episode, also offer to direct Captain America for Marvel, but this offer would not be accepted. Leterrier's other work includes the Clash of the Titans remake in 2010, and a bunch of work with Luc Besson, or at least in Luc Besson's stable, which is why he ended up making the Transporter films and the Unleashed martial arts movie.
Yeah.
He also directed the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance TV show for Netflix in 2019.
I'm glad to see he seems to have improved as a director.
Yes. Yes.
Because, I mean...
Somewhat, because Clash of the Titans is a similarly CGI action-y mess that has lost touch with its original material.
The first Transporter movie is serviceable enough as a popcorn action
Sure.
flick.
Sure.
I think I did see the second one, and I think that was fine too. I never saw the third one. So
I don't think he worked on the third one. I think it was just the first 2.
Okay, well, I mean, yeah, I don't think he's terrible at action. You can definitely tell that's his wheelhouse.
I just don't think this was the movie that he thought he was making. And that's the problem, is that this movie wants to be 15 different movies.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people didn't know what movie this was supposed to be, except, like, the few acting roles that actually work in it.
Which we'll get to when we get to acting. But yeah, like, this is part of the problem, is that I think that he's very skilled at what he does well. This was not one of them. because you have parts of it where it looks like a James Bond flick. You have parts of it that look like it's King Kong. You have parts of it that look like it's...
It was trying to be King Kong.
It was trying to be King Kong. There were parts of it that were trying to look like it was just a general war movie. Parts of it definitely looked like it wanted to be The Transporter. Parts of it wanted to be a horror movie. Parts of it wanted to be high drama. Parts of it wanted to be, like, deep science fiction. It's just a mess from start to finish. But I don't know, again, if that's the script, the director, just Edward Norton, which we'll get to in a minute as well. There are many things that went wrong with this. So it's not a surprise that some of his other work is far more passable than this one was. With the exception, again, of Clash of the Titans, and I know I'm biased, but that thing has lost complete touch with what the original Clash of the Titans was supposed to do. And it was not, let's just be relentlessly negative and talk about atheism and Greek mythology.
Even though the gods have an actual tangible presence in Clash of the Titans. Let's talk about that.
That's why Wrath of the Titans was a little bit better, but whatever. Neither here nor there. So the director for The Consultant, Latham, is not well known. In fact, the only other credits, at least under this pseudonym, which is what I assume this must be, is the other one shot that was produced at the same time. The one that we'll cover next week. So we don't know a whole lot about it at all. It just is there.
Yeah.
The writing, on the other hand, is a little more complicated. So The Incredible Hulk was written by Zach Penn, who worked on the script for Ang Lee's Hulk in 2003. He worked on several different treatments for this film before exiting in 2007 to write and direct his own movie, which was not this. The mantle in his stead would be taken up by Edward Norton, who decided that he wanted to write the script. Norton was notoriously particular about this screenplay and was changing it daily, even into filming and production. Unlike Iron Man, this is not in the same sense of leaving things open for, like, improv. It's just that he's constantly changing things, changing story elements, changing dialogue. Not happy with this. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna write this part in. Just a mess.
I remember hearing a little anecdote about how, I forget which movie it was, Anthony Hopkins was on, where they literally kept revising his role in the script like almost every day, and he took the revision script and threw them away, and he's like, no, I've already learned my lines. I mean, I'm gonna say them how they are.
Allegedly, but I love that story if it's true and whatever it's on. God bless. Because I would get wildly irritated, but also I think that's part of the reason why the other actors know what movie they're in, and Edward Norton doesn't really seem to, which again we'll get into later. But the fact that we argue that Robert Downey Jr. should have had a writing credit for Iron Man because he's improvising so much of it.
Yeah.
But the thing is that he's working with the director one-on-one to get these improv moments in. Everyone is collaborating on this versus it being one guy who's constantly changing everything and changing stuff and not really telling anybody anything, and supposedly.
And basically he's acting like he's the director and trying to, like, swing his dick around to get everything done the way he wants because he's the star, but it's like, bro, none of these decisions made any sense. And it fell very flat in the whole movie. Yeah,
which, again, we'll get into when we get into acting. But, like, again, there are just multiple parts of this that are just messy.
Very messy.
But despite being so particular about his screenplay and wanting to come in only because he could write specifically because he could write the screenplay, Norton was not actually granted an official writing credit for the film with the Writers Guild because they weigh plot over dialogue, and Penn stated that Norton hadn't actually changed much of his screenplay. I don't know if that's really a bragging right you'd want to claim.
Yeah, not for this movie, bro.
But it is what happened, so despite this being notorious for Edward Norton getting in the middle of everything, he doesn't actually have a credit on the film.
So all that
for nothing.
All that diva attitude for that.
Yeah.
Alright.
So Penn's other work includes co-story credits and co-writing a bunch of stuff. He worked with Joss Whedon to co-story The Avengers. So stuff can be okay, I guess.
I guess.
He also did a co-story credit for The Last Action Hero, which coincides with the film's mentioned last episode, with Shane Black as the actual screenwriter.
Yeah. Which makes sense for that movie.
Mm-hmm. And he also has co-writing credits for X-Men 2, X-Men The Last Stand,
Ooh.
and Elektra.
Ooh, that explains a lot.
Yes, it does.
Holy fuck.
The Consultant, on the other hand, was written by Eric Pearson, who we've run into frequently with his extended work on Marvel's Agent Carter, which lends well to the tone of S.H.I.E.L.D. agent discussions and piecing together the MCU with additional context bits. It knows what it wants to be. It's incredibly short, it uses a little too much archive footage, but it knows what it wants to be. It's a 4-minute commercial, that's what it is.
Yeah, it's incredibly short. It almost feels like it's nothing, but it does contextualize that end scene with Ross and Tony.
Which is very needed, and we'll get into that as well. There's also the problem that this movie has way too much CGI in it.
Yes.
The fight scenes are way too long. It's like the original Hulk, where the whole movie was just an extended action sequence, and it gets real damn boring. And you compare that to Iron Man, where we even remarked on this when we were watching Iron Man about how short that final fight actually is.
Yeah.
In comparison to the whole movie.
This
one doesn't do that.
This one draws it out to, 15 minutes?
Yeah, and there's, 3 different fight scenes that are this long each time, and it's too much, and that was the problem with the original, too, is it just, the whole thing was just a CGI fight and not anything else, and you lose all of the nuance and the science, and if you're gonna try and make me care about these characters, you do very little for those characters because you're too busy focused on the King Kongness of it all.
Yeah, see, that's the thing that really gets me about this movie. If you want these action scenes to be your set pieces for the movie, then you definitely cannot approach this screenplay as if you're trying to make some pretentious sci-fi movie, which I feel like is what Norton was trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels like no one really could agree on what this movie was, except for, his co-stars.
Well, and the funny part is that I think he was tapped for the original Hulk, and he didn't want to do it because he didn't like the story. Which is part of the reason why he wanted to come in with his own spin on the screenplay in this one. Mm-hmm. Except Edward, no, you can't.
This is basically Hulk. This is someone trying to come into, the Hulk fandom with their fanfic and be like, see, I wrote it better. That's what this is.
As someone who did this once upon a time, this is straight up all of those people that read Twilight or Harry Potter writing their own quote-unquote fanfic and going, see, but I can write better than this person who's actually published. And you end up with things like 50 Shades of Grey or The Mortal Instruments.
Yep. This is basically on the level of The Mortal Instruments.
Yes.
Not 50 Shades because there's no sex.
Well, no. And I'll get to that later when we get into story as
But it is very much on the quality of the Mortal Instruments movie, actually.
Yeah, the one that didn't make any sense. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I enjoyed watching Mortal Instruments more than I enjoyed watching this.
Because I realized yesterday that this movie, I feel like Edward Norton, unfortunately, he is a good actor, yes. Unfortunately, he does seem to have this reputation of him trying to take over productions. This isn't the first time he's done it.
It isn't.
He did it with American History X, too.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Yes, he fought with the director a lot on that movie.
Of course he did.
He's a Leo, so that makes sense. I'm just saying. And he does have a tendency to kind of get, this way. He feels like he's right and that he has the better ideas. And I genuinely feel like he was in Birdman, not really a superhero movie, kind of a commentary on the superhero movie genre and all that. Mm-hmm. He was actually good in that one. He was in a more supporting role because that was clearly Michael Keaton's whole vehicle. He would not let Norton take that shit over.
Thank God.
Like, you could tell even in the acting, he was outdoing Norton everywhere, and I loved it for that. But, like, I feel like Norton saw Joker, saw the attention it was getting, the praise it was getting, how it literally got Oscar nominated for Best Picture, got Joaquin Phoenix an Oscar for Best Actor, which, by the way, if I had to pick between him and Phoenix, I'm gonna say Joaquin Phoenix is the better actor.
I mean, yes.
He's also a cooler guy, but he seems like I would have a better time talking with him than trying to, like, get in this weird competition or intellectual competition with Norton.
Yeah. Which is what this movie kind of feels like it's trying to do in some places.
Again, I don't know him. I'm not trying to start shit with him.
Yeah, please don't.
I don't want any of that. I'm just saying that his reputation kind of precedes him on this. And I feel like he probably saw Joker and was like, that's the movie I was trying to make the Incredible Hulk to be. But the thing is, number one, these are two completely different characters. That was never going to work.
Obviously.
You could never give Bruce Banner even the same amount of darkness, nuance, and complexity that the Joker has, because they're two completely different characters. Even if you kept like the childhood abuse, even if you kept in, the mental illness on both sides, they're too different.
Well, and they shot themselves in the foot with the writing of this, because they assumed they'd done the other Hulk so recently that, well, nobody needs the origin story again. Nobody needs this context. So the thing is that Bruce comes off as incredibly shallow. There is nothing to his character, because they act like they've already established this in Eric Bana's movie. Yeah. Except that this is supposedly a reboot, so everything they try and show us is through this montage at the beginning, which adds very little context because the movie doesn't really address any of it. Mm-hmm. It assumes everything. That is why I think it's a lot more like a DC movie. This is like the one MCU film that feels honestly the most DC, and I say that knowing the color grading issues with the Dark World.
Meanwhile, Joker, which does have a DC character, did so much for that character. Even if they choose not to keep that context for movies going forward, they did something that I feel like a lot of people were trying to do with certain comic book movies. They made it way more nuanced. They made it something that we rarely see, which is part of why I think it was so successful.
Yeah. This one needed the context, and it didn't have it.
The thing is that I absolutely think this is what that Joker was, the kind of thing Norton was going for, but he just didn't understand that the Hulk and Bruce Banner are never going to be that.
Well,
he could have wanted that all he, wanted, and he was clearly trying to do something on that level. He was trying to intellectualize this.
You could have done high drama with this, but you have to show us the bits that are actually dramatic, which is not what this film does. It shows us only the James Bond-esque parts of it, and even James Bond knows when to roll it back.
Yeah.
Usually. So, The Incredible Hulk stars Edward Norton, as we've discussed already, Liv Tyler as Betty Ross, William Hurt as General Ross, Tim Roth as Emil Blonsky, and Lou Ferrigno as the voice of the Hulk. Lou Ferrigno is, of course, the guy who played the Hulk in the TV series that everybody knew about. The film also features Ty Burrell as Betty's new and quickly forgotten fling Leonard Samson, and Tim Blake Nelson as Samuel Stearns or Mr. Blue. Both of these side characters were really meant to feature in continued story for the Hulk, though a sequel was never made, so both attempts at this, especially the latter, really go nowhere.
Considering that the news on the street is they're bringing the Abomination back for She-Hulk, so I guess that might be the closest thing to a sequel we're gonna get.
I will take it, because Tim Roth was one of the best things about this movie.
He was.
Everyone, literally everyone, is out-acting Edward Norton in this film.
Yes.
Literally everyone.
Liv Tyler is out-acting him.
To be fair, with a lot of, even modern Marvel movies, Some of the girlfriends are kind of written very...
two-dimensional.
Yes, they're not really there. They're just there to be the girlfriend. They're just there to be, like, a sidekick at best. You see this a lot with, like, Christine and Doctor Strange.
They're there
you see it a lot with later Pepper. You see it a lot with later Jane and Thor.
They're there to establish that the main character's hetero.
Desirable. Yes.
That they're hetero.
Yeah, that too. And the thing is that I thought that this was going to be one of those that really had the two-dimensional female character, and on paper, had Edward Norton actually been acting up to par, she might have been.
Yeah.
But she wasn't.
No.
She was turning it out for this two-dimensional role, and established Betty with more charisma than Edward Norton did for an established fucking character.
More established. She was giving her more charisma, more personality, more emotion.
Yeah,
than Edward Norton was doing in the whole freaking
My
movie.
apologies, Liv, because I honestly assumed the writing was doing you a disservice. You were incredible in this, despite how bad this movie is.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, she's in Harlots too, so
I didn't know that.
she's in the second season of Harlots, and she's still turning it out.
Oh, I know. Like, I've always liked her as an actress.
Yeah.
I just assumed that it was going to be one of those very similar token Marvel girlfriend roles.
And I'm gonna say it, even in Lord of the Rings, she was doing pretty damn good for an elf that was, like, several hundreds of years old.
No, I love her in Lord of the Rings.
A lot of people want to find her flat in that, but I thought she was doing really good.
To be fair, her character kind of is pretty flat. They had to write her in extra bits. Like, dang, guys, of course she's gonna be a little flat.
But
There
again-
isn't a whole lot to Arwen, I said it.
But again, they did that more successfully than Toriel.
Which we'll get to in a very different episode.
Mm-hmm.
So we also see cameos from Lou Ferrigno, who is playing a different part than his voiceover.
Yes, a security guard for the college.
Yeah. Again, still with more charisma than Edward Norton was doing the rest of the movie.
Him and his bulging muscles and his security suit.
He looked amazing. Paul Soles, who was the voice of the Hulk in Marvel Superheroes in 1966, he was Stanley, like the pizzeria guy.
Oh.
And Martin Starr as a nameless computer programmer at the university. And Starr's cameo is really only notable as one because he was cast much later in the MCU as Roger Harrington, who is Peter Parker's teacher in high school. Mm-hmm. And so what they've done is that they have officially retconned this nameless character in The Incredible Hulk to be a younger version of Harrington when he was at college before he was teaching.
Yeah. Fine.
This one's less offensive to me than saying that one token little kid in Iron Man 2 is Peter Parker.
Yeah.
How dare you? How dare you? At least this one makes sense.
Yes.
Fine. So we also see the requisite Stan Lee cameo. This is also one of the only films that I remember anyway that may have very well killed off Stan Lee's character in said cameo. They never address it, so, like, you could argue that he was only injured. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
But we're arguing that Banner's blood is poisonous. Stan Lee drinks it. Sort of. He drinks, like, contaminated soda that has Banner's blood in it.
His weird, goopy blood that
which
floating
is
around in there like a lava lamp.
Which is how General Ross knows how to go looking for
him in Brazil.
Yeah, goes to go looking for him in Brazil. But we don't know what happens to poor Stanley in this movie.
No, we don't. And it's upsetting. How dare you?
I'm just going to pretend they didn't kill him off because that really upsets me.
Yes.
That upsets me more than, honestly, the rest of the movie did. And the rest of the movie upset me a lot. And then we also have a cameo from Robert Downey Jr., who returns as Tony Stark at the tail end of the film with his footage reused for The Consultant, which we've already discussed. Mm-hmm. The Consultant only had about 20% of its shared budget with the other one shot that it was filmed at the same time as left, because the other one A funny thing happened on the way to Thor's hammer took 80% of that shared budget.
Yeah, because that one did a lot more than this one does.
It did. So this one only had enough budget to basically show two people talking in a diner, and that's why it is 4 minutes of two people talking in a diner, with half of that actually just being reused footage from The Incredible Hulk.
Yep.
So this stars Clark Gregg as Agent Coulson, and Maximiliano Hernandez as Agent Sitwell, who will also show up in various different films as the same S.H.I.E.L.D. agent.
Yes.
The one shot then, I already talked about how it fills out half its runtime with archive footage.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, everyone is doing laps over Edward Norton. You can kind of also see, that this film is trying to be about 15 different things in this. Yes. And Liv Tyler knows what movie she's in.
Mm-hmm.
Tim Roth knows what movie he's in.
Yep.
William Hurt knows what movie he's in, and I've seen William Hurt's bad acting. Yes. It's called Sci-Fi's Dune, and he phoned it in, and it was awful, I'd still honestly rewatch that over this.
It was so bad.
It was awful. He plays Oscar Isaac's character in Sci-Fi Dune, and I almost loathed his Leto, and I love Leto. Yeah. So I don't know how you do that, William, but you definitely phoned that one in for the paycheck, my dude. This one was good, though.
Go watch his scene from A History of Violence. I had to show that to you. Mm-hmm. And show you that, no, William Hurt is a good actor. He's a great actor. He's an Oscar winner. So seeing him in that was surreal. It's the only thing I'd seen him in at the time, I think, was just Dune. And they put William Hurt's name all over because he's an Oscar winner
for that. But he's the worst actor in it.
Yeah.
And that's saying something because it's a Hallmark production, right?
That's why I had to show her that, and she was shocked at it. And I'm like, yeah, this is why it's so bad.
Norton is doing worse here than William Hurt was doing in his paycheck Hallmark movie Dune.
Yes.
That's how I honestly feel about this. Mm-hmm. But there are the parkour parts that look like it's trying to be like James Bond, and it's filmed with like a handy cam, and it makes me literally sick to watch it because they're moving I feel like I'm watching Cloverfield.
It's very jerky.
Yeah, I feel like I'm watching Cloverfield. It makes me motion sick. I did not enjoy it.
It's got a lot of hard cuts that don't really flow well together. It can feel a bit discombobulating.
Yeah, it has really nice nature shots, and the parkour when it had a steady cam from far away.
Yeah, when it was wide
great.
Shots. The wide shots, the establishing shots, the outside nature shots were all good. Every time
they brought out that fucking handy cam, I wanted to scream. And I did.
Like, you were not the Jason Bourne series, don't do this.
Yeah, but they were trying. They were trying real hard.
A lot of movies around this time were trying.
But I feel like what this movie really wanted to do, a more apt comparison, I think, at least tonally to the time this movie was released, versus now I probably agree with you that Norton probably did look the Joker and thought that that's what he wanted to make and didn't end up making. Yeah. But what I think that this film actually was trying to imitate at the time, and allegedly, I don't know, but it feels like to me what they were trying to do is give this relationship between Bruce and General Ross the kind of gravity that we have between Wolverine and, is he a general? Stryker?
I think so.
I think he's a general, at least later. General Stryker? Yeah, I think that's correct. Colonel? No, he's Colonel in an earlier movie. I think we see him graduate to General. Anyway, between Logan and Stryker. The thing is that the films establish a very deep character for Stryker, which is why you can keep bringing him back as a villain even with a different actor, and it still works as one of the more solid parts of the movie that he's in.
Especially with the foothold that he actually has in Logan's life.
Yes.
Like, that's part of why it works, because he is essential to how Logan is at the current time.
But I feel like this is really what they were trying to do, because you have the guy who's medically experimented on by the dude who's high up in the military.
Yeah.
You have Edward Norton running off into the snowy wilderness of Canada. You have all of his transformation sequences being filmed like he's in pain and taking a cue from Hugh Jackman. And you have all of these, like, this assumed relationship between Ross and Banner that is supposed to be given some kind of gravity. They know each other. They've worked with each other. The film does not establish this, and thus it falls completely flat, especially on Bruce's part, especially at the end when he's making that big choice whether or not he's going to turn back into the Hulk at the end, and he decides to sacrifice himself for this. But, like, he's supposed to be having, like, this reconciliation moment with Ross, and it just doesn't work, because there's nothing for them to reconcile over.
No.
We don't actually show any of their actual contention other than Ross blows up a few supposedly evacuated colleges, which is fucked up, let me tell you about that.
And the fact that Betty is his daughter and he doesn't want Betty with Bruce. But
like, that's such a novice character mark. Oh, but I don't want you dating my daughter, except that we also never get to establish the bad relationship between Betty and her dad.
Yeah.
They hint at it. Both those actors know what's going on there, but the audience doesn't get to see any of that.
No. This is why it would have benefited the movie if they had actually done an origin.
But no, the audiences were too familiar with it already. Okay, but if you're going to argue that, why did this film even need to get made?
No, they're too familiar with Spider-Man's origins. We needed to see this because if you guys wanted to rehaul the whole fucking thing, then you should have let us recontextualize the origin, how all of these people fit together, their relationships, so we actually have some form of investment. Mr. Norton, I'm such a writer.
This is why this movie comes off as Justice League, or Batman versus Superman. Well, more Justice League. Because Justice League is the one that the Joss Whedon Justice League. Let me recontextualize that, because I have not seen the 4-hour Zack Snyder cut of this movie.
I feel like I just get such a bug up my butt at Norton thinking he's a writer when he's
a fine actor, he just needs to leave the screenplay to other people.
He's a fine actor. I will give him that. He can do that far better than I ever could hope to. But when it comes to writing, sir, you need to take a seat and let other people do this. Okay?
The other comparison that I keep coming back to with this movie, especially at the end where it has, like, those shots of, like, the Hulk, like, jumping all over the top of New York City like it's a fucking Spider-Man movie. I have to compare this to Venom. And really, when you think about it, they're incredibly similar origins.
They are.
You have this kind of not quite split personality, but kind of split personality thing going on.
Yeah. With
one personality overtaking the other. One of them doesn't have moral scruples, the other one does. They both fuck up to the point where they become susceptible to this. Whatever. They're both very similar. The thing is that Venom works, at least for me, and I know that there's some contention with some people out there with Venom, but Venom works for me because it does not take itself seriously. This is like if you took Venom, you removed Tom Hardy and put in, like, Neil Breen. Not even a wooden post, just Neil Breen. You put in Neil Breen right there where Tom Hardy is. You don't give,
you know what, if they actually...
Michelle a character.
Yeah.
The bad guy's still the more interesting part of the movie. And you just make it take itself 900% too seriously.
You know, if they actually wanted to make a movie about Neil Breen, I would totally be okay with Edward Norton being Neil Breen.
That is a low blow.
What? He's more handsome. Actually.
I mean, it's not hard to be more handsome than Neil Breen.
I'm just saying, you know, maybe he'd enjoy that.
Oh my god. But yeah, so this is like if you had Neil Breen in a movie trying to be Venom and you remove all the humor out of it.
Yeah.
But you try and keep some of the jokes and they all fall flat because none of them are funny.
They fall so flat, which again, it doesn't make any sense. He's been in, like, dark comedy. He's been in, like, a Ben Stiller comedy. He knows... He was even funny in Birdman. Like, he knows these
He was
things.
funny in Fight Club, too.
Yeah!
But, like, the thing is that... You know this movie is bad when you get to Robert Downey Jr.'s scene. And even that humor falls mostly flat.
Yeah.
It is the one attempt at humor that almost lands.
Almost.
But even Robert Downey Jr. cannot make that charismatic or funny or fun. You remove all of the fun out of Venom, and this is what you get.
I feel like the only real humor...
There is no fun in this movie.
I feel like the only humor that actually lands is when Liv Tyler is screaming at that taxi driver and kicks his taxi. I mean, that's the only time.
But she's not on screen with Edward Norton at that point. That's the only reason it gets to be funny.
Yeah, she is. That's when they take the taxi together.
Fair, but... fine.
It's because he's not saying anything.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Again, I know we're dumping hard on Norton here, but it's...
I like him in other things. This was just so...
That's why we're dumping up,
singularly fucking awful. And my expectations for this movie were rock bottom. I have avoided watching this movie for 14 years. I wish I had avoided it for another 14.
Nope.
God, it was so bad.
I've watched... She's only watched it one time. I've watched it 3 times.
See, and my thing with this is that I'm used to being the one who likes the bad movie. I can see the potential in the Dark World. I enjoyed the Dark World, okay. Still recognizing that it's bad.
Yeah.
I like all the bad old X-Men movies, with the exception of the really bad one. I can even rewatch Wolverine Origins, and I, again, would rewatch that over this. I'm the one who likes Howard the Duck out of the pair of us, okay? Like, I'm used to liking the bad movies here. So when people tell me, oh, well, this one was the worst of them, oh my god, it's so awful, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna set my expectations low, but I usually like the ones that everyone else rags on, and I tend to not like some of them that end up being extremely celebrated, but that is not for today. I am also, like, a Star Wars prequel fan, so I know what this feels like.
Yeah.
I assumed that this was going to be, like, Showgirls bad. It is not Showgirls bad, it's just bad.
It's bad.
It's bad in almost every conceivable way, when everything set up for it could have worked. And I just don't know why it doesn't, other than the fact that it's just flat and lifeless and not fun. And it can't decide what it wants to be. And I guess these are just, like, my final comments on this before we even get to the cinematography. But Jesus Christ.
I just want to reiterate, again, for as much as I'm ragging on Edward Norton, I do like him as an actor. I think he's a good actor. I think he's very good in the right roles. He's even really cool on Twitter. Like, I don't think he's a bad dude.
No,
I just feel like when it comes to film and it comes to writing, I think it might bring out a side of him that isn't so cool.
Yes.
And I think that's the best way I could put it. So,
yes.
I'm not trying to pick a fight with him.
He's just a little too attached to this project in ways that bring out
I'm not picking a fight with him. I'm not saying I hate him or dislike him. I'm not doing any of that. I'm just saying, based on his previous behavior around films and the writing on these films, it's something that does not bring out a cool side in him.
Especially here.
Yeah, especially here, because I think it is to this movie's detriment. It could have been a passable movie, but there's just... It's after watching it 3 times, the first time was the preliminary first time watching it, just to watch it, you know, because it came out after Iron Man, blah, blah, blah. Second time was the big rewatch I was doing before Endgame came out. And the third time was right now.
With me.
And I can tell you, after watching it 3 times, it does not get better on rewatch. It actually gets worse, because you notice even more. And I was
really mad at this movie a minute into it.
And I feel like she really was. I was like, oh, this is gonna be special. And I really feel like the writing really is the weakest cog in this whole movie, and it really upsets the balance of everything else. It's one of those movies that proves that if your writing is not passable, serviceable, or any of those things, then yeah, the rest of the movie can suck as a result.
Yes. Especially if it's being written by the starring actor who is far too attached to the material in a not cute way.
And I also feel like he just didn't really understand the character, actually.
That's honestly fair. It's honestly fair.
I feel like, because when we look at Mark Ruffalo's characterization of this character, he does so much with so little.
There are even parts of, like, the writing of Ruffalo's Hulk that I don't always like.
No.
But I can still watch it. I don't inherently like, I
still,
hate this.
I liked his Bruce in Avengers. He was the best, one of the best things
part
about
of Avengers,
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was one of the better parts of Avengers,
was
especially even now.
Yeah.
Which we'll get to in a couple weeks, but it is one of the things that holds up the best in Avengers, even.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like because he probably approached it differently, but I feel like he has a much better understanding of Bruce's character and what drives him and what he feels. And I feel like that's missing in a lot of Norton's acting when he normally does a lot better with, deep diving and digging into character.
Well, and part of this also is because Ruffalo had a Hulk that was based on how the character actually worked, instead of, as a story point, this movie being literally obsessed with Bruce Banner's heart rate as a signifier for him hulking out.
Yes.
And I hate the fact that I had to go look this up, but this movie's science makes no sense.
Not his anger, but his heart rate.
His heart rate, not his anger. And they kind of conflate them sometimes when the film kind of forgets that it was obsessed with heart rate and was originally based on the thing it was supposed to be based on.
Mm-hmm.
And it does every once in a while, and I have a feeling why that's kind of why they cut out the original opening, on top of it being a little too dour an opening for a movie.
It's pretty grim when you're opening with, like, a suicide attempt.
Yeah. Ugh. We're not going to get into that, because it's a big old trigger.
But we did watch the alternate opening.
It didn't make the movie any better.
It didn't. The shots were nice. Again, the outside shots, the establishing shots were very nice. But when you get to the actual content of the scene, it's like...
No, so I went and looked all of this up before we watched the movie, because I wanted to know if this was actually legitimate. I spent 30 minutes with the American Heart Association, and I feel like I understand more about heart rate than this movie did. So, this movie, and I'm gonna get deep into the science here, not that deep, but as deep as I would have expected this movie to get that it doesn't do.
Yeah.
So this movie claims that Bruce starts flipping out about his heart rate doing certain things, like he's going through all of these training classes and yoga to, like, try and be zen and super chill and whatever. And you hear about all of these athletes who are, like, able to, like, keep their resting heart rate at, like, 40 BPM. Mm-hmm. Because this is just what they do.
Yeah.
And so, like, you have all these, like, activities and, like, your target heart rate for those activities and what your maximum heart rate is before you start kind of going into...
Also, you
start hurting yourself.
Also, you take into context and understanding of breathing correctly and training your body.
And I feel like even if you take out the BPM rates, and I'll get into those in a second, even if you take those out, if we're establishing that Bruce is going through all of this training and all of these courses and all of this meditation and all of these things, if his heart rate is spiking over literally everything that it's spiking over, one, you don't understand how any of this works.
No.
Two, none of that training is working. And three, he needs to be seeing a therapist for some extreme, and I mean extreme, anxiety to the point where it is literally debilitating for his life, and he should not be able to function on any kind of level.
Like, dude, this isn't anger. This is an anxiety disorder that you're not treating.
Yeah, exactly. When you base it around his heart rate, that's exactly what you get.
Mm-hmm.
So Bruce starts flipping out at the beginning of the movie, and we see, and the only reason I know any of this is because the movie has him have a heart rate monitor on him at all times. And it has him flipping out when his heart rate hits about 146 at the beginning over, like, nothing. Like, his anxiety spikes and he has a panic attack at, like, 146, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
And then he almost hulks out, or does finally hulk out at, like, 200, which is the maximum heart rate for, like, a 20-year-old male. And I don't mean maximum as in, like, you're immediately going to have a heart attack if you hit 200. You're just going to kind of feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So if we're assuming that Bruce Banner is about what Edward Norton's age was when they made this, which was like late 30s.
Yeah.
The max heart rate was about 185, and your target heart rate for like any kind of like strenuous activity was like 93 to 157. So that 146, well within shit that you do working out at a gym. So can Bruce Banner not go work out at a gym? Because we see him with, like, martial arts instructors and yoga instructors and shit. We see him doing parkour and running around. Like, a flight of stairs can raise your heart rate.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing for me is that this film also establishes that this means that he can't have sex. Because his heart rate just skyrockets.
And it's like, dude, are you just that... Like, are you...
Bruce, if you're actually asexual, bud, that's fine.
Yeah.
But just say that. Let's just establish that if that's what's wrong.
Actually, I don't think it is. I think it's is it because he went so long without it that he's just immediately like...
No! The thing is that I did the research on this as well. The average resting heart rest rate for, like, American males is, like, 60 to 100. He's flipping out when it barely peaks above this. So, during sex in this movie, or during the foreplay that doesn't lead to sex in this movie, it says his heart rate is at 160 and they haven't even done anything yet.
Yeah, they're just like, starting to get very handsy and heated. And see, the thing is, I don't think he is asexual because Liv Tyler clearly...
No, he's not. I'm just saying, like, but if you're uncomfortable with sex, just,
Like, she was
nobody's
clearly
forcing this in. Just say no. It's fine.
She was clearly expecting some nookie. It looked like a pose that they've done before.
Yeah,
and she was like,
but just say no if you're not interested, though. It's fine. The thing is that according to the National Library of Medicine, the heart rate during orgasm is only 114 to 117, and he's hitting 160.
Damn, really?
And he hasn't even owed yet.
Holy shit. Like, he hasn't even...
According to Harvard, male heart rate rarely moves above 130 during sex at all.
He has... I wonder how they...
Blood pressure is almost always under 170.
Like, they didn't even really get to, like, second or third base.
No, I know that there's this reputation that sex is like a hardcore workout. It's really not, though. It's actually very mild when it comes to, physical activity.
People want to call it, like, the little death or something.
It's just because of the pleasure centers that you're hitting, guys. It's not because of the actual strenuousness of the activity, unless you're into some stuff that is not vanilla sex. I did not take any of that into account, but neither does the movie, so I didn't need to. Yeah. The thing is that their math does not
add up.
Work.
No.
His heart rate shouldn't have even been hitting over 120. Especially if he's taking all these classes to be super zen about everything. Yeah. This is an anxiety disorder that is going unchecked, and even then, this would be, extremely debilitating to his day-to-day life.
Yes.
And not even, the Hulk's gonna come out at any minute. No, if the Hulk comes out at 200 BPM, I can see it in the context of all that parkour, running around, being super scared for your life, with dudes with guns who are chasing you. Whatever, that makes sense to me. Fine, you're running up around stairs all over the place. Makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. The rest of it doesn't. But even then, why are we conflating anger with heart rate? You're turning it into a thing that it isn't.
Also, it's he's a pretty thin waif of a guy.
Right?
He's not even that...
He's not even a bodybuilder. He's not huge. He's not muscled.
He's thin. He's almost scrawny by, Marvel lead standards, you know what I'm talking about. All those shirtless scenes of the guys getting buff. He's under Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony bulking up.
Yeah.
He's pretty scrawny for that.
He's lean muscled, but you don't really see a lot.
Yeah, he's got muscle on him, but there's no... My point is that there's no real reason for his heart to be going that hard when he's carrying around so little weight. Yeah, there's really no reason
There's not. So, cinematography for The Incredible Hulk was done by Peter Menzies Jr., whose filmography is also incredibly up and down, and this is where I get back to this, where there were some things that were great, and there were some things that it explains why some of this movie looks the way that it does. So, Menzies Jr. has worked on A Time to Kill and Die Hard with a Vengeance, which in my opinion is the superior Die Hard. It's a great Die Hard movie.
It is a very great Die Hard movie, actually.
It's the last good one. On the other hand, he also worked on the Clash of the Titans remake in 2010, which makes an incredible amount of sense. Gods of Egypt.
Oh, no.
And Lara Croft Tomb Raider, which was okay.
Well, you know who directed The Gods of Egypt, right?
No.
It was the director of The Crow.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. When I found that out, that was my reaction too.
Oh my god. Yeah, so again, this is where you get incredibly up and down results of things. This fits in line with the focus of the film being on CGI, even though, like, Norton and Roth did an incredible amount of motion capture, but it's so, like, and they made all these brags about all the mocap, and I don't doubt that the actors put a ton into the mocap, but you don't see it. Yeah. You don't see it under all that CGI. All the cute little things they talk about how, like, well, they had Abomination almost trip because Blonsky's so small and he's kind of like baby Steve, and he's, like, suddenly in this body he's not familiar with, whatever. Yeah. Like, they make all these little brags about all these references that they make, but you can't see any of them.
No.
You don't. It's just not there. It's just a big ol' mess with just a ton of CGI that it reminds me a lot of, like, how I had initial reception, at least, to parts of, or the latter half of the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
And even that is more detailed than this, but it just where everything was, like, the same color, and just very dark and dour. Like, Blonsky's Abomination is supposed to look, quote, light green. That
was not light green.
No.
It was beige at best.
At best.
And a sickly yellow at worst.
Yeah, it's not. It's not good. And these action sequences, again, override the entire film as much as they do the mocap.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, audiences didn't respond well to the film's originally intended opening, which we talked about. So instead of this, Kyle Cooper, who was the editor responsible for the comic book flipping Marvel logo that we used to see over the top of everything that they don't use as much anymore, they brought him in to edit down the, quote, origin for Banner at the beginning of the movie, and it's like this, 5-minute maximum sequence of just...
a flashback.
At best. So there was about 70 minutes of footage for Banner's origin for this movie that they cut into 5, maybe, reused scenes.
Oh my god, they should have actually
That thing was so slapdash, and, like, I felt like I was watching strobe lights coming at me for that whole opening sequence, on top of, like, some X-Men DNA sequencing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, shots of, like, science stock footage.
It should have...
But, like, they're trying real hard to establish the backstory of, like, Banner doing the gamma radiation and, like, the experimentations that all of that's leading into, and all of the stuff that the movie should have established and didn't want to because it felt like everybody was already familiar with it, except they weren't. And if they were, why did you even need that opening sequence at the beginning in the first place? You don't. Except you did, and it doesn't contextualize anything. But this thing is just the most frantic montage I've seen in a long time. It is hard to parse what is happening.
It looks like a fever dream, really.
At best. And they keep referencing it through the film, and it's like, this thing is a nightmare. And not in an effective way where you're, like, introducing the audience to anything that makes sense within that nightmare, or thing that pays off later.
I would have rather them use the whole 70 minutes.
I would have rather sat through that movie than the one we got. Yes. Agreed. This was a mess. But again, that's another one of those where it's kind of copying other things that have already been out and been successful and trying to emulate itself after that. But this film does that with, again, like 20 different sources, so it just ends up being confused on top of everything else. It's a mess. It feels more like a rapid-fire music video than an effective montage. That's really what it feels like. It feels like I was watching something on MTV trying to promote the movie with the background, like some song they were releasing for the movie, except that's not what they do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if it had been that, like, Spider-Man song that Chad Kroeger did, and they just put in, like, this rapid-fire sequence of scenes over the top of that, that feels like what this should have been and was not, because it was the opening to a movie.
Yeah. Could you imagine, though, if they had written an original song for those songs?
God.
That's all
and then you have to compare that editing to, and then the rest of the film had a different editor, so Kyle did not do the rest of the movie. He was brought in for this sequence, and that's it. The rest of the movie had different editors, and then you have to compare this shot that's just like this weird amalgamation of stuff to, like, that one particular scene of them doing, like, the email tracking for S.H.I.E.L.D., which is just, like, the most nonsensical thing I've ever seen. It's, like, such old-school AOL ad information superhighway.
I had flashbacks.
Nonsense.
I had flashbacks of that movie, The Net.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm in. Type. I'm in.
I'm in, Mr. Blue.
Oh, my God. It's on top of, like, the AOL Instant Messenger interface. Like, oh my God. So the technology is dated as hell on top of everything else. And again, you can't help but compare that to Iron Man, which is released the same year, and its technology doesn't feel near as dated, even though it very well could have. I don't understand why this movie turned out the way it did, but it did turn out this way.
I think a lot of people feel that way about it, actually.
Yeah, well, and back to, like, writing an original song for this movie.
None of the Marvel movies actually have an original song. You know that? I just realized that. Not a single Marvel movie.
No, they have original scores, but nothing, like, written directly for the... Yeah, this isn't like Spider-Man with Dashboard Confessional and shit.
Or the first Spider... They'll say a hero will save us, which is still a banger,
The Chad Kroeger song, yeah.
That's a good song.
Yeah, so... The music for this movie was composed by Craig Armstrong, and it's not bad. Again, it's one of those that's, like, it's serviceable. I really liked that sting of, like, the traditional Hulk theme over, like, that one shot where it just kind of pops up out of nowhere.
The piano music.
Yeah, it was nice. But Craig Armstrong is better known for his work on snappy Baz Luhrmann films like Romeo and Juliet and Moulin Rouge and The Great Gatsby.
Well, that explains why this feels very,
This was another one of those, this was your paycheck film.
Yeah. It feels a bit kind of phoned in for a guy who normally does Baz Luhrmann movies.
Hey, this is no Baz Luhrmann movie. Nope. Hot damn. Again, like, the theme song sting was nice when we noticed it, but overall, again, just one of those you don't really notice that much.
No.
And now that we've spent an hour ragging on this film... what would you rate it overall? Out of 5, like we have with all the others.
You know, there was a time when I probably would have just given it, like, 2 stars. Because I was feeling generous, but honestly, after watching it this 3 times now and just seeing how it seems to depreciate in value each time...
Yeah.
I'm probably just going to give it a 1 star, because I never really want to watch it again.
No. And that 1 star, I agree with you. That's what I rated it on Letterboxd. I gave it 1. I didn't quite give it a half, and I only give that to movies I literally loathed from start to finish.
I give it a
1 only because of the other side actors who are decent in it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Mm-hmm. I give it a whole... Otherwise, I would give it, like, half a star, really, because I just don't want to watch this ever again. I feel
there's
like
nothing effective about it, and even the MCU has forgotten about it.
The 1 star is purely for William Hurt Ross, Tim Roth being a
great villain.
Yeah, a great villain, really.
This movie didn't deserve a great villain, which is sad about it, too.
A compelling villain that too many people forget, and Liv Tyler acting her freaking heart out in this role.
There are so many people that were like, she was so flat. I'm like, no, she was not. Like, look at Edward Norton in comparison to her, who's flat. Like, it's him.
Like, there was zero chemistry between them on screen, but my God,
she was trying so hard.
She was trying so hard for this romance that I'm like, I wish we had seen, girl. I wish I could see why you're acting this way, but clearly whatever she was doing in her head was more compelling than whatever was in the script.
That was probably what she had to do to get through it, quite honestly. But yeah, that's how I feel about it too. The side characters made this movie, I'm not even going to say tolerable, because it really wasn't.
Also, I just want to have this on record for the outline you have here for overall rating, final comments. It's just lol.
Yeah, my notes on this were just lol, because I knew that we were not going to be nice to this one.
No.
Like, again, I was willing to give this, like, oh, okay, I'm sure it's, like, not great, but I'm sure it's not as bad as everyone says it is.
You hated it within, like, the first 5 minutes.
I hated it within the first few minutes, and that wasn't because I wanted to. Because I did not know what to expect with it, other than other people said it was bad, and I was like, okay, it's probably not great, whatever, but I like bad movies. No. No. I would rather rewatch The Rise of Skywalker than this. And that's saying a lot, because
all we did was bitch through that.
Boy, I did not like that movie either.
No, that movie was bad.
Oh, boy.
Yeah,
I'd rather rewatch Solo over this, and that one was so deeply unnecessary.
Can't wait for us to
cover Star Wars. Mm-hmm.
Because you're gonna make me watch fucking Rise of Skywalker.
I sure am. We're gonna rewatch it again.
And you're gonna make me watch Solo, which I've managed to avoid watching all this time.
This will be your Incredible Hulk. You're welcome. This movie is my villain origin story, though. It was absolutely awful. I hated it. God, it's so bad. Like, and I like bad movies. I like bad movies, and this was not a fun bad movie.
No, you like trashy movies.
Yeah, I like Showgirls bad. I don't like bad. And I'm only bringing that up constantly because we watched Showgirls last night, and it was bad, but it was fun as hell.
Yeah, your review for it was literally the Caligula of Lifetime movies.
It is. It is. It is Caligula of Lifetime movies. This doesn't even have, like... If this had been, like, fun stupid, it still would have been passable for me. But it is unremarkable to the point where this is why Marvel has basically forgotten that it exists for a reason.
They're trying
so hard to bury it. The only thing that it brings back is the gamma radiation, because they need that, and Ross, because they need him for other stuff. And he was passable, so that's fine.
They're trying... so hard to bury this that it's like George Lucas trying to bury the Star Wars special.
George Lucas went on record and said that if he'd had a sledgehammer, he would have tracked down every VHS copy that people had, like, recorded over their TVs when that aired, and he would have beat them all so that no record of it existed. I'd still rewatch that over this. In fact, I have several times.
Oh, God.
And not just the cartoons.
That's the only part of it I want to watch.
This is not a good movie, y'all. And no. I'm sorry to say it's not a good movie, but thankfully, it is the only one I think I actually hate this much. And that's saying something, because there are a few coming up that I don't like. Oh, boy. But we'll be covering Thor next week, and that's far more fun. Whatever you feel about it, it's a lot more fun.
Thor's gonna be like a breath of fresh air after this.
Oh my god, yes. And like, even with like some of the worst MCU films, at least they're fun, or at least parts of them are fun. No part of this was fun.
No.
It was way too long. I just wanted it to end. Hopefully She-Hulk redeems any part of it at all.
You got Tatiana Maslany?
I don't know how you say her last name.
Well, however you pronounce it, I'm sorry, Tatiana, but I mean, she's a great actress, so I feel like if she can pull off something as difficult as Orphan
8
Black,
roles at once,
then I feel like she can handle She-Hulk.
Yes, I agree, but again, we said that about Edward Norton, and then we got this movie. So I don't know. Well, I'm sure that she doesn't have the same reputation either. So hopefully it just turns out better.
Yeah,
it's fine. It's over and it's done with. We watched this, so you don't have to unless you already have. In which case, we watched it so you don't have to again.
Yes. And we went into all the reasons and why it probably turned out the way it did.
Yes. So that all said,
you're welcome.
Thanks for listening to this episode of FANSPLAINED. If you enjoy what we do, consider donating on Ko-fi. Everything we make goes right back into the production quality of the show. I lost my place in the middle of that. How great. Production quality of the show, and I lose my place. We appreciate all of our subscribers and everything you do, and we're thankful for anything from Hulk smashing that like button to your questions and comments on each episode, and especially sharing the show with your friends. FANSPLAINED is a weekly media criticism and deep dive podcast, and we are still working our way through the chronological order of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yes.
Next week, we'll finally be looking at A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to Thor's Hammer and Thor.
Mm-hmm.
You can find our updates here on YouTube, as well as on Twitter and Ko-fi at FANSPLAINED. If you want more of our conversations on the MCU and other fandoms, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell for new episode notifications. Until next time, Salt Shakers, this has been Ryan.
And M.
With the FANSPLAINED podcast. See you next week.